So I mentioned last week that students are back on campus, and so we have not only, as mentioned last week, the season of all the questions of us getting to know someone, but also this last Thursday we had a thing on campus called the Student Activities Fair, and so basically everyone has a table, and all like the student groups have a table, and you kind of like invite people to part of your group, and it's one of those things where it's so strange. I don't know if it's a Midwest thing, but if you're standing behind the table, people walking, they don't ever look up. They just look at kind of what your table's all about. Like you have a banner on your table or a sign on your table. They never make eye contact, because it's like, if you make eye contact, then you have to engage. And if you engage, then you're going to get drawn in. It's going to be this tractor beam kind of thing. Like it brings you in. And people have a tough time saying no. That's the thing. I remember actually there was a student years ago. She said that on Student Activities Fair Day, like this day we had last Thursday, a couple years ago, that she signed up for 88 clubs. Because she was like, oh, I wanted to try things. And also, I'm not very good at saying no. And I thought, okay, the one part about like wanting to try new things makes sense. That second part, like, I can completely see that in you. Like this, I don't like saying no. I have a hard time saying no. I think that's a lot of us. When it comes to what we're invited to do, when it comes to what someone's asked us to do, when it comes to life, I think a lot of us really, really struggle with the ability to just simply say no. Or even better, Midwest, no thank you. Like just be polite, why not? But we have to realize this, and I don't know who needs to hear this right now, but you realize that no is a complete sentence. Like you don't have to give any more, no thank you is nicer, but you don't have to give any more explanation. You don't have to give a reason for why you're saying no. We have to develop the ability, right? We have to develop the ability to say no, because we need to establish boundaries in our lives. I mean, it is so important. The ability to say no is so important. It's one of the first things that we develop once we develop a sense of self. I mean, think about this. What is a toddler's favorite word? Like, think of it, this is remarkable. As a toddler, as a child, becomes more and more aware of the fact that they are a self, right? That they can actually give an answer to what they're being asked to do or told to do. Their favorite word is no, which is also why a lot of parents' least favorite words are no. But this reality, of course, that every one of us has to learn, when it comes to maturing, we have to learn how to say no. Again, toddler learns how to say no. We have to, as we grow, learn how to say no. And one of the most important no's we need to learn how to say is we will remain stunted and immature until we learn how to say no to ourselves, which is crazy. Think about that. That the reason why we say no is because we have a sense of self. And the hardest no that many of us will ever have to say is that no to ourselves. And yet, no is powerful. But there's a question. And that question is, whenever we say no, what is your no for? Again, to be able to do this, it's essential in order to thrive. But what is your no for? In the gospel today, in Matthew's gospel, we have this moment where Jesus says, okay, if you want to be my disciple, and he lays out this three criteria. It's actually in all three synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. I remember when I was a teenager, I had a conversion to the Lord when I was a teenager, and I remember reading Matthew's gospel and reading this exact passage that we read today, when Jesus lays it out and says very, very clearly, if you want to be my disciple, if you want to follow me, three things, really, really clearly. And I remember just really resonating with this, thinking, okay, great. So Jesus isn't just like, hey, if you want to be my buddy, if you want to kind of just hang out with me. He says, no, very clearly, you must, if you want to be a disciple, you must deny yourself, take up your cross daily, and follow me. And I just remember appreciating, valuing very highly the fact that Jesus makes it so clear. If you want to be my disciple, if you want to come after me, you must deny yourself, take up your cross daily, and follow me. So we're going to focus on the first one, because the first one is not the most important, but first things first, right? So Jesus says, if you want to be my disciple, you have to deny yourself. Now, I think sometimes, many of us, we think that means one of two things. The first thing I think we think it means is that we hear Jesus say you have to deny yourself, and we just automatically fill in, you have to deny yourself things. Right? So the idea behind this is that if I want to be a disciple of Jesus, I have to be able to say no to stuff that I want, which isn't like entirely wrong, right? Because in order to be a disciple, we have to say no to things that God has clearly said are sins. So I have to say no to that. And also, we know what Lent's like. There are times when I have to say no. I have to learn how to say no to things that I want. Say no to the chocolate. Say no to the whatever the Lenten thing is, right? So if I want to be a disciple, a lot of times we hear Jesus say, deny yourself, and then we just fill in, deny yourself stuff, deny yourself things. And that's not wrong, right? Because We need to have discipline. We need to have willpower. We need to have some kind of self-control. It's part of life. In fact, anyone who wants to do anything great has to say no to certain things. But that's not what Jesus is saying here. So it's not just deny yourself things. The other thing I think sometimes we hear it, and this is just, it's kind of a big jump, but sometimes some people I've talked to will say that when they hear Jesus say, you must deny yourself, what they interpret that to mean is you have to ignore yourself. Meaning, like if you want something, just pretend like you don't. Like if you desire something, just ignore it. And that is, A, that is not what Jesus is saying. B, that is not healthy. That is not a good way to live. In fact, and there was this, that's a great way to implode in some ways, right? There's a study of people who are trying to quit smoking. And this is just kind of remarkable because people trying to quit smoking and trying to stop any kind of compulsive bad habit behavior, a lot of times people say, well, just, distract yourself or just have any number of different coping mechanisms. Well, there was this study where they brought this group of people in and they had them not smoke for a certain amount of time before this day. It was something like, maybe it was 48 hours or even longer. They said, bring in your favorite pack of cigarettes and your lighter and everything. And so we're gonna have the opportunity, but don't smoke. And they had them sit down. I said, okay, now take out your pack of cigarettes and look at it, but stop. They stopped for 2 minutes. Okay, now pack your cigarettes, whatever you do for cigarettes to kind of prep the package. So they did that. Okay, now stop and waited for 2 minutes. And they had these steps along the way. It was like, okay, unwrap the cellophane. Okay, now stop. And then it was, okay, now open the package. Stop. Now smell the cigarettes in there. Okay, stop. And every time they take out a cigarette, hold it in your hand. Basically, take out your lighter, look at your lighter, stop. Every time they had this, they did it for over an hour. And every time they stopped, they said, okay, now write down, what are you feeling? Like write down the cravings that you're experiencing every time you take the next step, but then just stop. They ended up not smoking after an hour, but sent them home. The next week, they reported that there's a certain part of the group, they had reduced their smoking without even anyone telling them. They had reduced their smoking almost 50%, over 40%. They had reduced their smoking. Why? Because they were primed to do this. When they went into that 1 hour long of take the thing, stop, take the thing, stop, they were taught this technique called riding the wave. The idea that, okay, I'm experiencing discomfort, but it's not going to go forever. It's just going to come in waves. And so when this discomfort comes, when this craving comes, ride the wave. Ride the wave of that craving. Ride the wave of that discomfort. Basically, pay attention to it. Don't ignore it. Don't pretend it's not there. Don't pretend like you don't actually want the cigarette. But ride the wave knowing that if you pay attention to it and record your craving, but wait, the craving will come like a wave, and then you'll ride it. You're not fighting against it. You're riding it, and then it'll leave. So all that's to say, Jesus, when he says deny yourself, he's not simply saying deny yourself things, and he's also definitely, Jesus is a very good psychologist. Jesus is not saying ignore yourself. We're paying attention to what we want, paying attention to our desires. What Jesus is actually saying is more profound and is more comprehensive than just deny yourself stuff, or is less destructive than ignore yourself. What Jesus is saying, that word for deny in Greek, is a word that actually means disown. Like disown yourself. Another way to say it is, another translation is, renounce any claim you have on yourself. When Jesus is saying, if you want to be my disciple, the first step, you have to renounce any claim that you have on yourself, any part of your life that you think is yours. You say, it's not mine anymore. I'm just actually disowning my life. I'm disowning myself. Now, here's the interesting thing about self is the church is not teaching that self is bad. In fact, Christianity, one of the big revelations Christianity has given to the world is that is the revelation of the goodness, the dignity of the individual. Now, keep this in mind, that there has been value in people, but almost always across cultures, across time, across history, your value comes from your family. Your value comes from your tribe, your clan. Your value comes from your nation, your race. Christianity comes on the scene and says, no. This is the revelation of the individual. This is the revelation of the goodness of the individual, the goodness of the self, that your value comes from the fact that you are made in God's image and likeness, yourself. And so there's this remarkable teaching in Christianity about the goodness of the self, the value of the self, the worth of the self. In fact, what's the second great commandment, right? Jesus says the second great commandment is love your neighbor as yourself. To love your neighbor as yourself, there's a precondition. That precondition is you actually love yourself. And so in Christianity, the self isn't bad. In fact, in Christianity, the self is so good that there's a temptation. And the temptation is to realize that the self is so good that I can make an idol of myself. I mean, we all do this. This is one of our, almost every one of us has this temptation. That's one of the reasons why it's so hard to learn to say no to yourself, because the self tends to be a tyrant, where we say, okay, me, it's all about me. It's all about it's all about my desires, my wants, my happiness, my plan. The temptation that every one of us experiences is to make an idol of the self. We've said this so many times, I'll say it again though. A lot of times people think like we make an idol out of bad things. We rarely make idols out of bad things. We almost always take good things and make them into ultimate things. That's what it is. And so the self is so good that we're tempted to make an idol out of it. But remember, the self isn't a bad thing. It's just not mine. Self isn't bad. It's not yours. So I have to be able to deny myself, meaning I have to be able to, as Jesus said, renounce any claim that I have on myself. I have to be able to do what? Say no. Here's a question. Why? Why do I have to be able to say no? I mean, we realize that almost always we only say no for the sake of something we perceive as being greater or better. So the self is good. The self has a lot of worth. The self has so much value. You have so much value. Though we say no to it, we renounce any claim we have on it for the sake of something greater. Another way to question is, what is your no for? So you might be familiar with the concept of like the samurai back in the 12th century. Starting in the 12th century, I think that's when the samurai kind of came into being in Japan. Remarkable stories, right, of these people who are incredible fighters, incredible swordsmen, incredible tacticians. They later on they became really great administrators and managers. But the samurai were recognized as not only being incredible fighters and incredibly wise and smart, tactically brilliant, but they all pledged an allegiance to serve a person or to serve a family. And they placed all their strength at the service of this person. They placed all their brilliance at the service of this family. And so they had a great deal of honor. Now, at the same time, or shortly after the samurai came on, there were people who are just as skilled as the samurai. They had the same fighting abilities. They had the same swordsmanship. They had the same tactical brilliance. They had the same all the same skills. But they were called ronin because they didn't have a master. Like where the samurai took all their strength and placed it at the service of this family or the service of this individual. The ronin, ronin is Japanese. It means wave man, meaning that wherever the waves would go, that's where they would head. They had no allegiance to anyone. They took their strength and they put it at the service of whoever would pay them the most, which basically means they took their strength and they put it at the service of who? At the service of themselves. One group of people, the samurai, were seen as being noble, as fighters with great, incredible honor. The ronin, same incredible gifts, same incredible talents, but because their gifts and talents were not at the service of anyone, because they didn't have any allegiance, because they were simply out there fighting for themselves, they kind of became a bit of a shameful group of people. Because they wouldn't take their strength and spend it. They wouldn't take the best of themselves and spend it on something greater than themselves. Remember, the self is good. But it's so good we tend to make an idol out of ourselves. The invitation, of course, is to give your very best for something that's worth even more. I mean, think of this is actually this is the recipe of like a really good life, a life well lived as well, is to make a sacrifice of the best that we have to offer. I've been thinking about this recently when it comes to parents. There's something so good about parents of adult children, or children, in their late teens, early 20s, into 30s, because those parents, the parents who have really, really spent themselves for their children, they're different. They might in some ways be weaker. They might in some ways be more tired. They might in some ways struggle. But they wouldn't say that what they gave was a waste. In fact, this is kind of the mark of a good parent, is to say, no, I'm going to spend the best that I have for the sake of my children. In fact, I saw this video recently. It was of two sisters, and they were watching a video of their own parents' wedding day. And the two sisters they were crying, not because they were so beautiful. They were crying with this regret. They said, one sister was filming the other, and she's like, look at them. She said, they're so young, they're so beautiful, they're so happy, they're so in love, and then we happened. And she said, we ruined them. And there's something that's partly true about that. But at the same time, these parents are saying, no, I want to spend the best of myself on you. I don't want to grasp onto myself. I want to offer the best of myself for something even greater than myself. And I think you're greater than me. I think about this every year. We get Focus missionaries on campus, right? Focus is the Fellowship of Catholic University Students. And so what happens, Focus does, is that they invite students who are just recent graduates to become missionaries on college campuses. And there are so many, hundreds and hundreds of young men and women every single year who commit at least 2 years, if not more, of saying, okay, this is the strongest I've ever been. This is the most capable, most qualified. I have the most potential I'll ever have in my entire life as I'm graduating college. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend that for the sake of the gospel. I'm going to give the best that I have on the chance that I'll be assigned to a campus somewhere in this country, so that some people on some campus in this country will get to know who Jesus is, and their lives will be transformed. These missionaries, every single year, they say, I'm going to give the very best that I have so others can have life, right? I'm going to say no to this good thing myself. I'm going to spend it on something greater. And this is the thing. They're saying no because there's a greater yes. They're willing to renounce any claim they have on their lives. The question is, what is that no for? Well, it's because that no paves the way for their yes. That no is what's necessary. It's what makes the yes possible. And that's what we're invited to as well. We're invited to this, but Jesus makes it clear. If you want to come after me, you must deny yourself, right? Renounce any claim you have on your own life. Say no for the sake of something greater so that you can say yes. And so the question is, okay, how do I do that? That's wonderful. I want to be a disciple of Jesus. How? I still have to live. I still have to make decisions. I still have to make choices. I still have to go forward because life doesn't stop when I say no. How do I say no in such a way? How do I renounce my claim on my own life and live for Jesus? I think, I was struggling with this. I'm like, I don't know. I mean, for a long time, I was thinking like, what does it actually look like? And you might be thinking right now, okay, I'm going to deny myself. I'm going to renounce any claim I have in my life so I can say yes to Jesus. What does that yes look like? Well, I'm so grateful. St. Paul in the second reading today. It's Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. We could go so deeply into Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2, but I just want to highlight one thing. Paul sums up exactly how we deny ourselves, how we say that no, so that we can say yes to something greater. When he says it so clearly, he says it right away. He says, beloved. He actually says, holy ones. He says, holy ones, those of you who are already set apart, those of you who are already consecrated, those of you who already belong to Jesus, here's what your next step is. Offer your bodies or offer yourselves as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, your spiritual worship. Think about this. He says, offer yourselves. Remember, yourself is good. That's what we offer. I mean, go back to the Old Testament. What would you offer to God in worship? You wouldn't offer something subpar. You wouldn't offer something bad. You'd offer the very best that you had. And here St. Paul is saying, yes, exactly. The best you have to give is yourself. So give the very best you have to offer. I've already renounced any claim I have on myself, so now that's what you need to offer. But he goes on to say, he says, offer yourselves, offer your bodies as a living sacrifice. And this is fascinating because in the Old Testament, there's no such thing as a living sacrifice. There is no such thing as a living sacrifice in the Old Testament. Basically, everything that's offered is killed. Everything that's offered is dead. But St. Paul says, but you have to go on living. To offer yourself as a living sacrifice means that each and every part of your life, because you're going on living, each and every part of your life can become a living sacrifice. Each and every part of your life can become an act of worship, where I said no to the claim I have of myself. And the yes is that every moment is now offered to God. I'm not grasping onto myself anymore. I'm actually offering myself to God, not because the self is bad, but because the self is not mine. What we basically get to do is we get to approach God and say, God, it's yours. And it's so simple. This is the last thing. It is so simple. How do we offer that? How do we do that? How do we become a living sacrifice, offering to God our entire lives in worship? It just basically is saying, God, I offer this. One word even say, this. This right here, God, I offer this moment. God, I offer you this action. God, I offer you this work. Whatever you're doing right now, God, I offer you this work. If you're resting, God, I offer you this rest. You have a thought, and that thought might be a struggle thought. That thought might be a challenging thought. That might be a great thought. God, I offer you this thought. Maybe there is a challenge. Maybe there is a struggle. Okay, God, I'm in the midst of this battle. I offer you this battle. I offer you this struggle. Maybe you find yourself in a place where you can't get past self-accusation. Okay, God, I offer you this self-accusation that's coming against me. Maybe you have a memory that keeps popping back up, and maybe it's a great memory. God, I offer you that memory. Maybe it's a horrible memory. You just have this regret. God, I offer you this memory. I offer you this regret. I'm giving it to you. Maybe it's a joy. God, I offer you this joy. Maybe in this moment your heart is broken. God, I offer you this grief. The thing is, no matter where we're at in life, if you're alive, your life can be offered. No matter where you are in life, if you are alive, you can be a living sacrifice. That's one of the reasons why Archbishop Fulton Sheen, he once said, whenever he drives by hospitals, he realizes that hospitals are one of the places where there's the greatest waste. The greatest waste happens in hospitals because there is so much suffering that goes unused. Where people can be in a hospital and they can say, God, use this. God.